The humid breath of August hung heavy, even as twilight bled into the sky, painting the western horizon in streaks of bruised purple and fiery orange. Sarah sat on her patio, a tall glass of iced tea clinking softly in her hand, the gentle hum of the cicadas a lullaby to the day's end. Tomorrow, she thought, she would finally brave the attic, retrieve the boxes of old photo albums she'd promised her mother she'd sort through. The simple, domestic rhythm of her life was a comfort, a hard-won peace after years of city grit and corporate grind. Moving to the suburbs had been a deliberate choice, a pursuit of quiet and community. Mostly she had found it. Mostly. Her gaze drifted towards the pool, now a dark mirror reflecting the nascent stars. Its winter cover was still on, stretched taut and smooth across the surface, a necessary shield against the coming autumn leaves and the unpredictable whims of nature. She planned to have it professionally removed in the morning, a final act before closing up the house for a weekend trip to the coast. A sudden, sharp movement at the very edge of her property caught her eye. It was quick, a flash of something dark against the fence that separated her yard from Patricia Hayes's meticulously manicured, yet strangely barren, expanse. Patricia. Her neighbor of 2 years, a woman whose every interaction felt less like a conversation and more like a carefully veiled accusation. The woman who had complained about the excessive splashing from Sarah's pool during a quiet afternoon swim, the obnoxious glint of the sun off the water, and even the untidy presence of the pool cover in winter. Sarah had tried, God knows she had tried, to be civil, to be understanding. She'd even put up a taller privacy screen along their shared fence, hoping it would quell Patricia's ceaseless grievances. It hadn't. Now, that dark shape, gone as quickly as it appeared, prickled at her nerves. Her logical mind told her it was probably a stray cat, or maybe just a trick of the fading light. But a chill, sharper than the evening air, settled deep in her gut. She took a slow, deliberate breath, pushing the unease away. Patricia was difficult, yes. But vindictive enough to trespass? To damage property? No, that was a leap too far. The next morning, the air was crisp, carrying the faintest whisper of autumn. Sarah hummed as she brewed her coffee, the promise of a sunny, warm day lifting her spirits. Today, the pool cover would come off, revealing the inviting blue water beneath, a last splash before the season turned. She finished her coffee, grabbed her phone, and stepped out onto the patio, ready to call the pool service. Then she froze. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. The hummingbirds, usually flitting around her feeders, were gone. The vibrant reds of her petunias seemed to dull. Her eyes, wide and disbelieving, fixed on the pool. The cobalt blue cover, usually smooth and unblemished, was desecrated. A long, jagged slash, crude and deliberate, ran from the center almost to the edge, a gaping maw revealing the dark, still water beneath. It wasn't a tear from wear and tear, not a rupture from a heavy branch. This was a clean cut, clearly made by something sharp, something wielded with malice. It looked like a cruel, twisted smile carved into the heart of her sanctuary. A strangled gasp escaped her lips, quickly followed by a guttural cry of pure, unadulterated rage. Her hands flew to her mouth, trembling. This wasn't just damage. This was a violation. Someone had done this. On her property. To her property. Her gaze snapped towards Patricia's house. The blinds were drawn, as always. A pristine, almost aggressive silence emanated from next door. But a flicker of movement, a fleeting shadow in an upstairs window, sent a jolt through Sarah. Could it be? The thought was ugly, accusatory, but it clung to her mind like a burr. She walked towards the pool, each step heavy with dread. Her fingers traced the rough, unforgiving edges of the cut. It was deep, irreparable. Her summer plans, her weekend escape, the simple pleasure of her backyard, all shattered. A wave of helplessness washed over her, quickly replaced by a furious resolve. She wouldn't let this stand. Pulling out her phone, her fingers fumbled as she dialed. First, the pool service, canceling the removal and explaining, her voice raw with suppressed emotion. The sympathetic sigh from the other end did little to soothe her. Then, she thought of calling the police, but what would they do? She had no proof, just a gut feeling and a history of neighborly animosity. No. This called for a different approach. She stared at the mangled cover, then at the impenetrable facade of Patricia's house. Her jaw tightened. Her next call was to her insurance company. "My pool cover," she began, trying to keep her voice steady. "It's been vandalized." The representative, a young woman named Emily, listened patiently, guiding Sarah through the... Sarah stared at the email, the words blurring, then sharpening again. Subrogation. The sound of it was almost poetic, a legal symphony of comeuppance. Her smile widened, a slow, predatory grin that felt entirely uncharacteristic yet deeply, profoundly satisfying. Patricia Hayes. The name, usually a source of irritation and simmering resentment, now tasted like sweet vindication. She reread the crucial line, letting it sink in. "Therefore, we will be initiating a subrogation claim against Ms. Hayes to recover the full cost of the replacement cover. You will, of course, be reimbursed for your expenses, and your deductible will be waived." No deductible. No personal expense for Patricia's petty, destructive act. It was perfect. Beyond perfect. The urge to call someone, anyone, was almost unbearable. Her best friend, Liz, who had endured countless rants about the neighbor from hell. Her mother, who had gently suggested, "Maybe she just needs a friend, dear." Sarah stifled the impulse. This was a private victory, a quiet, almost sacred moment of karmic alignment. She wanted to savor it, let the warmth of it permeate every corner of her previously violated peace. She spent the rest of the day in a state of suspended animation, going through the motions of work, but her mind was a whirlwind of anticipation. What would Patricia do when she received the notice? Would she deny it? Fight it? Or would the sheer, unyielding force of a corporate entity finally break through her carefully constructed facade of righteous indignation? The next few days were a blur of practicalities. The pool company, now armed with the insurance company's full backing, moved swiftly. A new, gleaming cobalt blue cover was ordered, its installation scheduled for the following week. The security cameras Sarah had hastily installed now offered a silent, reassuring vigil over her property. She felt a lightness she hadn't experienced since before the incident, a sense of having reclaimed her space, not just physically, but emotionally. Then, the first tremor. It was a Tuesday afternoon. Sarah was out in her garden, tending to her wilting petunias, when she heard it. A shrill, almost animalistic cry of rage, followed by a torrent of indistinguishable shouts. The sound ripped through the quiet suburban air, a jarring dissonance that made her heart pound. It was unmistakably Patricia's voice, amplified by sheer fury. Sarah straightened up, trowel in hand, her gaze locked on the Hayes' house. The blinds were still drawn, but the front door suddenly burst open, and Patricia emerged, her face a mask of contorted disbelief and sputtering anger. She clutched a crumpled letter in her hand, her knuckles white. This is outrageous!" Patricia shrieked, seemingly to no one in particular, but her eyes, wild and darting, landed on Sarah. "You? You think you can get away with this?" Sarah remained silent, simply watching, a cool, detached observer. She leaned against her fence, a faint, almost imperceptible smirk playing on her lips. The cinematic moment she had envisioned was unfolding, perhaps even more dramatically than she had dared to hope. Patricia, catching Sarah's unwavering gaze, stumbled forward a few steps, her voice rising to a fever pitch. You fabricated this. You planted evidence. This is a malicious, slanderous attack on my character." She waved the letter frantically, a crumpled white flag of war. "The insurance company. They have no right. No right at all. No right to do what, Patricia?" Sarah's voice was calm, cutting through Patricia's hysteria like a razor. It was the first time she had directly confronted her neighbor since the incident, and the power dynamic had shifted irrevocably. Patricia faltered, her tirade momentarily derailed by Sarah's unexpected composure. To send me a bill for your pool cover. It's ludicrous. I didn't touch your miserable, obnoxious pool cover." The denial was rote, practiced, but the raw panic in her eyes betrayed her. "Really, Patricia?" Sarah pushed off the fence, taking a slow, deliberate step towards her. "Because my insurance company seems to think otherwise. And so does the police detective who came out. And apparently, their own records show a pattern of incidents involving your property and your neighbors." The words were delivered softly, but they landed with the precision of a surgeon's scalpel. Patricia gasped, recoiling as if struck. The mention of the police and the pattern of incidents clearly hit a nerve. Her face, already flushed with anger, now paled, a sickly yellow tint beneath her carefully applied makeup. That's completely irrelevant. That was a misunderstanding. A petty squabble over a rose bush," she stammered, her voice losing its previous volume, shrinking into a desperate whine. "A rose bush that somehow ended up pruned down to its roots, just like my garden shed door mysteriously splintered," Sarah countered, her voice still quiet but laced. The approaching siren, a mournful wail cutting through the still, hot air, had an immediate, galvanizing effect on the trapped partygoers. The collective bluster and indignation that had fueled their earlier protests seemed to deflate, replaced by a more primal urge for self-preservation. Towels were hastily gathered, half-eaten snacks abandoned, and the inflatable unicorn, now a sad, deflated husk, was left bobbing unceremoniously in the sparkling water. The chaotic scene, moments ago a vibrant tableau of summer revelry, transformed into a tense, hushed waiting room. Karen, however, reacted differently. The siren's crescendo seemed to inject a renewed, frantic energy into her. Her earlier tears had dried, leaving streaky mascara tracks down her flushed cheeks, and her eyes, wide and desperate, darted around the yard as if searching for a magical escape hatch. "They're coming, Alex. The police are actually coming. You've really messed up now," she shrieked, her voice cracking. "My reputation. My standing in the community. You're ruining everything." "You ruined it yourself, Karen," Alex replied, their voice flat, devoid of emotion. The distant wail of the siren was now a throbbing pulse, closer, louder. "Every single action has a consequence." The burly man with the tattoos, who had threatened to call his own lawyer, was now pacing near the locked gate, occasionally peering through the bars as if hoping to spot a weakness in the formidable wrought iron. The Hawaiian-shirt man had retreated to a patio chair, trying to appear nonchalant, but his foot was tapping a frantic rhythm against the concrete. The woman with the small child was openly weeping, trying to soothe her fussy baby, while simultaneously shooting fearful glances at Alex. Then, the siren reached its peak, a piercing shriek that seemed to vibrate through the ground. A patrol car, its blue and red lights flashing a chaotic disco across the manicured lawns, pulled up to the curb in front of Alex's house. A second car followed closely behind. The collective gasp from the backyard was audible. 2 officers emerged from the first car, their uniforms crisp against the summer heat. They were a study in contrasts. A tall, lean female officer with an air of efficient calm, and a broader, older male officer with a world-weary expression. They approached Alex's front gate, which remained unlocked and open, and looked towards the commotion in the backyard. Alex, still holding the key to the back gate, walked slowly to the side of the house, positioning themselves so they could address the officers while keeping an eye on the now panicked crowd. "Officers," Alex called out, their voice clear and steady. "Thank you for coming. I'm Alex Miller, the homeowner." The female officer, Officer Ramirez, nodded, her gaze sweeping past Alex to the scene beyond. "Mr. Miller, we received multiple calls about a disturbance and a large gathering on private property. Can you explain what's happening here?" Her tone was professional, but a hint of surprise colored her voice as she took in the sheer number of people in the backyard. "Yes, officer," Alex began, holding up the key. "This is my private residence. I live alone. My neighbor, Karen, who lives 2 doors down, decided to invite approximately 50 strangers to use my pool without my permission. I repeatedly told her not to. I sent texts, left notes, and verbally confronted her this morning when the first guests started arriving." Alex gestured towards Karen, who was now trying to hide behind a palm tree. "They refused to leave, so I secured my property. They are currently trespassing." Officer Ramirez's eyebrows rose slightly. The older officer, Officer Miller, no relation, Alex presumed, pulled out a notepad. "You locked them in, sir?" he asked, his voice slow and deliberate. "I locked my gate to prevent further trespassing and to ensure they remained until authorities arrived to de-escalate the situation and document the damages," Alex clarified. "I explained to them they are free to use their phones to call for assistance or to wait for you." Karen, emboldened by the arrival of the police, now burst from behind the palm tree, rushing towards the back gate, her arms flailing. "Officers! He's crazy! He's locked us all in here! It's kidnapping! He's holding us against our will! It was just a friendly pool party, and he's completely overreacted." Officer Miller raised a hand to Karen, his expression unreadable. "Ma'am, please step back. We need to hear all sides of this." He then turned back to Alex. "Mr. Miller, can you open the gate, please? We need to speak to everyone involved." Alex hesitated for a split second. The thought of unleashing the chaos again, of losing control, was a physical pang. But this was the proper way. "Yes, officer," Alex said, walking towards the back gate. With a deliberate flourish, they inserted the key, turned the bolt, and pulled the heavy gate open. The moment the gate SW. The news article, with Patricia's grim mugshot splashed across Sarah's screen, felt like the closing of a chapter, yet simultaneously the opening of a new, more intense one. The private war had become public, a spectacle for the entire community. Sarah felt a strange mix of emotions, a chilling satisfaction that justice was being served, and a gnawing unease about the prolonged drama unfolding in her quiet life. The cease and desist letter from Patricia's lawyer was a stark reminder that this wasn't over, it was merely escalating. The next few weeks were a blur of depositions, phone calls with her lawyer, and a constant, low-grade hum of anxiety. Sarah found herself reliving the incident over and over, each detail magnified under legal scrutiny. Her lawyer, a formidable woman named Miss Thorne, was a beacon of calm in the storm, guiding Sarah through the labyrinthine legal process. "They're trying every angle, Sarah," Miss Thorne explained during one of their calls. "Patricia's lawyer is arguing mental distress, claiming you provoked her. Classic deflection. But we have a solid case. The insurance company's investigation, the detective's findings, the purchase of the utility knife, it all points to her." "Mental distress?" Sarah scoffed. "She's the one who cut my pool cover. My pool, my home, my peace was violated." "Exactly," Ms. Thorne affirmed. "And that's what we'll emphasize. Her history of similar incidents, however minor they seemed at the time, also strengthens our position. It establishes a pattern of behavior, not a sudden, uncharacteristic outburst." The day of the full court hearing arrived with an almost palpable weight. Sarah dressed carefully, choosing a professional, unassuming outfit. She wanted to project calm strength, not aggressive triumph. As she entered the courthouse, the air crackled with a sterile tension. Familiar faces from her neighborhood were scattered in the public gallery, their expressions a mix of curiosity and support. Liz was there, offering a tight, encouraging smile. Patricia was already seated at the defense table, her posture rigid. She looked even more gaunt than at the arraignment, her skin sallow, her eyes darting nervously around the room. Her lawyer, Ms. Davies, a woman whose sharp features seemed to perpetually convey irritation, whispered urgently to her. Patricia still wouldn't meet Sarah's gaze, but Sarah felt the raw intensity of her neighbor's hatred burning across the courtroom. The prosecutor, a methodical young man named Mr. Chen, began his opening statement, painting a clear picture of Patricia's escalating aggressions, culminating in the destruction of Sarah's property. He meticulously laid out the evidence: the insurance company's report, Detective Miller's findings, the hardware store receipt for the utility knife, and the eyewitness accounts of Patricia's behavior. Then, it was Sarah's turn to testify. She walked to the witness stand, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. The oath felt solemn, binding. As she sat, she could feel Patricia's eyes on her, finally, a malevolent stare that tried to bore holes through her resolve. "Ms. Jenkins," Mr. Chen began gently, "could you please recount for the court the events of August 15th and 16th? Sarah took a deep breath and began, her voice clear and steady. She described the quiet evening on her patio, the fleeting shadow by the fence, the horrifying discovery of the slashed pool cover, the call to the insurance company, Patricia's frantic, enraged outburst, and the subsequent legal proceedings. She spoke factually, avoiding embellishment, letting the stark reality of the events speak for themselves. When it was Ms. Davies' turn to cross-examine, the atmosphere in the courtroom tightened. Patricia's lawyer approached the stand with an aggressive stride, her heels clicking sharply on the polished floor. "Ms. Jenkins," Ms. Davies began, her voice dripping with skepticism, "isn't it true that you and Ms. Hayes have had a long-standing history of animosity?" "We've had disagreements, yes," Sarah admitted, her gaze unwavering. "Disagreements, or rather, a pattern of your own provocative behavior?" Ms. Davies pressed. "Isn't it true that Ms. Hayes repeatedly expressed concerns about the noise from your pool, the glare as she put it, and the unsightly presence of your pool cover?" "She expressed complaints," Sarah corrected, "which I tried to address by installing a privacy screen. My pool is a standard size, and the noise levels were well within community guidelines. And isn't it true that you were frequently observed engaging in activities that Ms. Hayes found disruptive, such as late-night swimming and hosting loud gatherings?" Ms. Davies continued, her tone accusatory. "I occasionally had friends over for a swim, and my pool is typically used during daytime hours," Sarah replied calmly. "As for late-night swimming, I abide by all noise ordinances. The pool cover was a safe." The 2 weeks leading up to sentencing felt like an eternity, and a blink of an eye all at once. For Sarah, the initial surge of vindication had settled into a more complex emotional landscape. The public triumph, cemented by the news article and the jury's verdict, was undeniable. Yet, the image of Patricia's broken figure, the desperate sobs echoing in the courtroom, had left a residue of unease. Justice, she realized, wasn't always a purely satisfying elixir. Sometimes, it tasted a little bittersweet. The neighborhood, however, had definitively chosen sides. Most offered Sarah their quiet support, small nods, and whispered congratulations. Others, a few who perhaps had found common cause with Patricia's rigid perspective, avoided her gaze, their silence a different kind of judgment. Sarah ignored them. Her focus was on moving forward, on reclaiming the tranquil life that had been so brutally interrupted. Ms. Thorne, Sarah's lawyer, called her a few days before the sentencing. "Sarah, you don't necessarily need to be there for the sentencing, but it might offer some closure. It's largely a formality now that the verdict is in. The judge will consider the prosecutor's recommendations, Ms. Davies' plea for leniency, and the pre-sentencing report." "I'll be there," Sarah said without hesitation. She knew she had to see it through, not for triumph, but for the definitive end to this chapter. The courtroom on sentencing day was less crowded than during the trial, but the air was still heavy with expectation. Patricia was led in again, her appearance even more haggard. Her hair was lank, her clothes seemed to hang on her, and her eyes, once sharp and accusatory, now held a vacant, defeated stare. She looked like a woman who had aged a decade in a matter of weeks. The sight sent a fresh pang through Sarah. This wasn't the Karen from the viral memes. This was a profoundly unhappy, broken individual. Mr. Chun, the prosecutor, presented his recommendations: a significant fine for the criminal mischief, restitution for the remaining damages not covered by the insurance company's subrogation efforts, though the bulk was already being pursued, a period of probation, and a mandatory anger management program. He emphasized the premeditated nature of the act, the history of neighborly disputes, and the profound impact on Sarah's sense of security. Ms. Davies, Patricia's lawyer, made a passionate, if desperate, plea for leniency. She spoke of Patricia's previously unblemished record, her community involvement, albeit exaggerated, and painted a picture of a woman under extreme stress, pushed to her breaking point by perceived harassment. She highlighted Patricia's recent mental health struggles and suggested a suspended sentence with extensive counseling. The judge, a stoic woman with a kind but firm demeanor, listened intently to both sides, occasionally consulting her notes. Her gaze swept over the courtroom, lingering briefly on Sarah, then on Patricia. "Miss Hayes," the judge finally spoke, her voice clear and resonant, "you have been found guilty by a jury of your peers on 2 counts, criminal mischief and trespassing. The evidence presented was compelling, indicating a deliberate and malicious act of vandalism stemming from a long-standing pattern of animosity towards your neighbor, Ms. Jenkins." Patricia flinched, her head drooping further. "While the court acknowledges the arguments made regarding personal stress," the judge continued, "these do not excuse your actions. Damage to property, particularly when it encroaches on a person's private sanctuary, undermines the very fabric of community and personal safety. Furthermore, your actions have not only caused financial loss, but significant emotional distress to Ms. Jenkins." Sarah felt a quiet acknowledgement of her feelings in the judge's words. It wasn't just about money. It was about the peace that had been stolen. The judge then delivered her sentence. "For criminal mischief, you are sentenced to a fine of $2,500 and restitution to Ms. Jenkins for any remaining costs not covered by the subrogation claim, to be determined by the court. You will also serve 1 year of supervised probation. Additionally, you are mandated to attend and successfully complete an accredited anger management program." Patricia's shoulders slumped. The financial penalty alone was substantial, but the probation and anger management were the real blows, public declarations of her inability to control her destructive impulses. "For trespassing," the judge continued, "you are sentenced to a 6-month suspended sentence, conditional on your successful completion of probation and the anger management program. Should you violate the terms of your probation or fail to complete the program, the suspended sentence will be immediately activated, resulting in incarceration." A collective gasp rippled through the gallery. A suspended sentence meant jail time. The "for sale" sign in Patricia's front yard was more than just a real estate marker. It was a monument to the silent, undeniable shift in the neighborhood's equilibrium. For Sarah, it brought a profound sense of peace, a quiet sigh of relief that settled deep in her bones. The constant, low-grade tension that had permeated the air for years dissipated, replaced by a genuine tranquility. She could now garden without glancing nervously over her shoulder, swim without the imagined specter of a judgmental glare, and simply exist in her own home without feeling under siege. The cul-de-sac slowly exhaled. Other neighbors, who had previously tiptoed around Patricia's volatile moods, began to relax. Children played a little louder. Hedges that had been aggressively trimmed now grew with less scrutiny. It was as if a toxic cloud had finally lifted, revealing the clear blue sky beneath. Small gestures of camaraderie emerged. A shared cup of coffee over the fence, an impromptu chat about rising grocery prices, the kind of casual, easy interactions that had been stifled for so long. Sarah continued to work with Ms. Thorne on the civil aspect of the case. While the criminal charges had been dealt with, the insurance company was still vigorously pursuing its subrogation claim against Patricia, and Sarah was still owed restitution for any out-of-pocket expenses and the distress caused. The process was slower, more methodical than the swift criminal proceedings, but Ms. Thorne assured her it was progressing steadily. Patricia's financial situation is complicated, Ms. Thorne had informed her one afternoon. Her lawyer is attempting to negotiate a lower settlement with the insurance company, citing hardship. But the evidence of intentional damage is too strong. And with a criminal conviction, her leverage is practically non-existent. It's only a matter of time. Sarah didn't actively follow the civil proceedings. She trusted Ms. Thorne implicitly, and was content to let the legal machine grind on without her constant attention. Her focus had shifted back to her own life, her garden, her work, reconnecting with friends, and enjoying the simple pleasure of her pool. She even started taking a pottery class, finding solace in the tactile creation of something beautiful and tangible, a stark contrast to the destruction she had witnessed. Months passed. Autumn painted the trees in fiery hues, then gave way to the crisp, silent embrace of winter. The new pool cover, once again, took its place, a steadfast guardian over the dormant water. But this time, it was a symbol of resilience, not vulnerability. Then, in early spring, a new U-Haul truck appeared in front of Patricia's house. Sarah watched from her kitchen window as a young couple, full of bright-eyed optimism, began unloading boxes. They had 2 small children, whose excited shouts and laughter soon filled the previously silent space. The "For Sale" sign was gone, replaced by a sense of burgeoning new life. Sarah felt a genuine warmth bloom in her chest. New neighbors. A chance for a true fresh start, not just for her, but for the entire cul-de-sac. She decided to bake a batch of her famous chocolate chip cookies as a welcoming gesture, a simple act of neighborly kindness. A few days later, armed with a plate of warm cookies, Sarah walked across the lawn, a little nervous but mostly eager to meet the new family. As she approached the front door, it swung open, and a friendly-looking woman with kind eyes and a wide smile greeted her. "Hi! You must be Sarah," the woman said, her voice warm. "I'm Emily, and this is my husband, Mark. We just moved in. So good to finally meet you." Sarah returned the smile, introducing herself and offering the cookies. "Welcome to the neighborhood. I hope you'll be very happy here." As they chatted, exchanging pleasantries and discussing the local schools, Emily paused, a thoughtful expression on her face. "You know, when we were looking at this house, our real estate agent mentioned there had been a bit of a situation with the previous owner. Something about a neighborly dispute? Didn't go into detail, just said she had moved rather abruptly." Sarah hesitated for a moment, then decided on honesty, albeit a condensed version. "Yes, there was a dispute. It became quite contentious. But it's all resolved now. The previous owner, she's gone." Emily nodded, a flicker of understanding in her eyes. "Well, We're just thrilled to be here. The house is perfect, and the yard is lovely. We saw you had a pool cover, which is great for safety with the kids." She paused again, then, with a slightly more hesitant tone, added, "Actually, when we were doing the final walkthrough, the previous owner's lawyer mentioned something about an ongoing financial obligation from an insurance company. Didn't quite understand it, but it sounded like a substantial amount." Sarah's eyes widened slightly. The insurance company's subrogation claim. It was Steve,